Welcome to Family Justice Files. Warning: this is a fictional story created for entertainment and reflection. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. I thought coming home early would be a surprise. I thought I would hear my son breathing in his bed. Instead, I opened his bedroom door and felt my chest go hollow. The bed was cold, empty, too perfect. My name is Alicia. I'm 32, and in that moment, I knew something was wrong. I called my mother. She told me my son was safe, sleeping at my sister's house. Her voice was calm, too calm. My sister hated children. She never let my son inside her home. I didn't argue. I opened my phone and checked his smartwatch. The blue dot loaded slowly. Then it stopped. Not at my sister's house, not anywhere near it. My 8-year-old son was alone in the middle of a cemetery at 1 a.m. Before you hear what I found there, subscribe to this channel and stay with me through what happened next. Because this night didn't just change my son's life, it ended my family forever. I drove with the window cracked open, cold air burning my lungs so I wouldn't pass out. Every red light felt like sabotage. Every empty street felt complicit. I kept checking the map, refreshing it, begging the dot to move. It didn't. The gate to the cemetery was open. That was the first wrong thing. The second was how quiet it was. No wind, no animals, just my engine ticking as it cooled. I left the car running. Gravel cut into my shoes as I ran. Headlights sliced through rows of stone that all looked the same. I kept counting steps in my head so I wouldn't scream his name. Then I saw him, small, too still, tied to an iron fence with rope that looked older than I was. His pajamas were soaked through. His knees were pulled tight to his chest like he was trying to fold himself smaller. There was tape over his mouth. I didn't think. I dropped to my knees and tore it away with my hands. He didn't cry at first. He just stared at me like he wasn't sure I was real. Then he made a sound I had never heard from my child before. A broken sound like air forcing its way back into him. I wrapped my coat around him and tried to untie the knots. That's when I noticed the suitcases. 2 of them, packed, standing upright. That wasn't fear. That was a plan. I felt someone watching me. I looked up and saw my sister leaning against her car like she was waiting for a bus. Cigarette glowing, face calm. She didn't rush, didn't flinch. She flicked ash onto the ground near my son's feet. "I'm teaching him a lesson," she said, "so you can finally focus." Focus on what didn't matter. I stood between her and my child without saying a word. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. I told her to step back. She laughed. That laugh snapped something loose inside me. I pushed her away from us, hard enough to make her stumble. I didn't chase her. I didn't yell. I finished untying my son. Lights exploded across the graves. Red, blue. Sirens swallowed the night. I had already called for help, the moment I saw the map. The officers moved fast, voices sharp, commands clear. My sister screamed, not in fear, in rage. I didn't listen. I lifted my son and felt his heart racing against my chest. I held him until the cold stopped shaking him. And standing there with my child alive in my arms, I knew something else had died. Whatever I thought family meant was already gone. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, but because my body finally understood something my mind had avoided for years. I wasn't tired. I was being consumed. By morning, I had already made the first decision. Not emotional, practical. I documented everything. The GPS data from my son's watch, the hospital intake notes, the nurse's recorded observations, the time-stamped call log with my mother. I didn't call anyone. I didn't explain myself. I didn't argue. I learned a long time ago that chaos feeds on reaction. At the hospital, my son barely spoke. He flinched every time the door opened. Every footstep made his shoulders tense. When the social worker came in, she didn't interrogate. She observed. Who brought him in? Who stayed? Who spoke over him? She watched my mother pace the room. She watched her avoid eye contact with my son. And then she asked a simple question. Who authorized the child's overnight stay? The room went quiet. My mother answered too quickly. She did. She pointed at me. But the nurse interrupted. She wasn't present when the child was admitted, she said calmly, and the child repeatedly asked for his mother. That was the moment my mother's story cracked. Not loudly, but permanently. Later that afternoon, a police officer came by to follow up. Not aggressive, not dramatic, methodical. He asked me to walk him through the timeline. I did. Without emotion, without exaggeration, just facts. The GPS location, the cemetery, the restraints, the suitcases. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he nodded and said something that settled deep in my chest. This wasn't a prank. This was planning. That night, my mother pulled me aside in the hallway. She didn't apologize. She negotiated. She said my sister was desperate, that money was involved, that dangerous people were pressuring her. And then she said the sentence that ended everything. If you just cooperate, this can all go away. I looked at her, really looked, and I realized she wasn't afraid for my son. She was afraid of exposure. I told her I wasn't cooperating with anyone who endangered my child. She stared at me like I had betrayed her. That was when I understood something painful but freeing. She never saw me as a daughter. I was a buffer. The next morning, I met with a family attorney. I didn't ask what to do. I asked what documentation mattered. He told me to stop explaining and start protecting. So I did. We changed locks, disabled spare keys, pulled camera logs. That afternoon, we reviewed footage. My sister entering my home while I was in the air, using the spare key. Searching my office, opening drawers, ignoring toys. She wasn't looking for clothes. She was looking for papers. Property papers, estate documents. The motive was suddenly clear. That night in the cemetery wasn't random cruelty. It was leverage. Fear makes people sell fast, and she thought fear would make me disappear. That realization changed how I moved. I stopped thinking like a daughter. I started thinking like a guardian. Every decision after that came from one question only. Does this protect my child? If the answer was no, it didn't matter how uncomfortable it made them feel. I wasn't cruel. I was done being convenient. I backed everything up, encrypted it, shared copies. Not with family, with professionals. 2 days later, my phone started ringing nonstop. Unknown numbers, old relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't answer. I didn't defend myself. I already knew what story they were hearing. And I knew something else too. People who believe lies without asking questions aren't allies. They're spectators. That evening, I sat next to my son while he slept. He held my hand even in his dreams. And I made myself a promise. No more explanations. No more tolerance. From this point on, I wasn't surviving. I was building a boundary they couldn't cross. And anyone who tried would face consequences. The knock on my door didn't sound like concern. It sounded like accusation. Hard, sharp, official. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there, and right behind them was my sister, crying, shaking, pointing at me like I was dangerous. She told them I stole $10,000. She said I took family jewelry. She said I abandoned children who depended on me. She spoke fast, too fast, like someone afraid the truth might catch up. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I stepped aside and let them see the apartment. A mattress on the floor, trash bags stacked against the wall, a laptop, nothing else. No jewelry, no stolen cash, no signs of a life someone was stealing from. Her story didn't match the space. The officers searched anyway, closet, bags, bathroom, nothing. My sister kept talking, adding details, changing timelines, correcting herself mid-sentence. That's when the hallway filled with noise. Footsteps, uneven, urgent. Justin appeared. Out of breath, face pale, phone shaking in his hand. He walked past his mother like she wasn't there. "I have a video," he said. The officer took the phone, watched. My sister hiding the jewelry under her own bed, laughing, saying she would finally teach me a lesson. The room went quiet. Not dramatic quiet, heavy quiet. The officer's posture changed. His tone shifted. He looked at my sister and explained slowly that filing a false police report was a criminal offense. She screamed, called Justin a traitor, tried to grab him. They stepped between them. For the first time, she wasn't the loudest voice in the room. 2 days later, child services arrived at the house. No warning, no time to prepare a performance. They walked through every room. The smell came first, then the mold, then the empty refrigerator. The caseworker didn't accuse. She documented. Who pays the bills? Who takes the kids to school? Who buys groceries? There were no answers. Without me holding everything together, the structure collapsed instantly. That night, the boyfriend disappeared. Packed a bag, took cash, left without a word. When the emergency hearing came, my sister looked smaller, not remorseful, terrified. The judge didn't raise his voice. He reviewed the reports, the photos, the timeline. The decision was fast. The children were removed, not because of one mistake, but because neglect doesn't explode. It accumulates. My sister cried, but not for the kids. She cried because the system she depended on was gone. A week later, she showed up at my office, dropped to her knees in front of strangers, begged me to pay rent, said the kids needed me, said I was heartless. I looked at her and felt something settle inside my chest. I had already paid. With my body, with my time, with years of silence. I raised them, I said. You didn't. Security walked her out. I stayed seated. That night, alone in my apartment, I didn't feel victorious. I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when chaos finally stops living inside your body. And for the first time, I knew the worst part was over. The days after the hearing felt strangely hollow. Not peaceful, not painful, just quiet in a way my body didn't recognize yet. I woke up expecting noise, arguments, demands, a crisis waiting in my phone. Instead, there was nothing. No messages asking for money, no calls asking me to fix something, no one needing me to rescue them. For the first time in years, my time belonged to me. Justin stayed in contact. Short messages, careful words. He told me the younger kids were confused, not angry, just tired. Tired of chaos, tired of waiting for adults to become adults. I didn't badmouth their mother, I didn't rewrite history. I just told him the truth. That loving someone doesn't mean carrying their consequences forever. That helping doesn't mean disappearing yourself. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop holding a structure together that only exists because one person is breaking themselves. At night, the guilt still tried to visit. It always came quietly, in questions. What if I had stayed longer? What if I had pushed harder? What if I had tried one more time? But then I remembered the door. The handcuffs, the way the story only changed when I stopped protecting the lie. I realized something that shifted everything. I didn't cause the collapse. I was just no longer absorbing the damage. There's a difference. I started sleeping through the night, eating real meals, walking without checking my phone every 5 minutes. My shoulders dropped an inch, then another. I hadn't noticed how tense I was until my body finally let go. One afternoon, I sat alone with a cup of coffee and realized something quietly radical. I didn't miss the version of myself who was always needed. I missed the illusion of being valued. And that illusion had been expensive. The children weren't saved by my sacrifice. They were saved when the truth was seen, when systems stepped in, when adults were held accountable, when I stopped being the buffer that allowed neglect to continue unnoticed. That realization didn't make me proud. It made me steady. Because steady means sustainable, and sustainable is how you build a future. I wasn't walking away from family. I was walking toward a life where love didn't require self-erasure. And for the first time, that didn't feel selfish. It felt necessary. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact. I wasn't managing fallout. I was simply living. And that quiet was the proof that I had finally chosen myself. I didn't rebuild my life all at once. There was no dramatic sunrise moment, no victory speech, no apology tour. There was just consistency. Quiet mornings, locked doors, bills paid on time, food in the fridge, a body that finally felt safe enough to relax. Justin kept texting. Updates about school, questions about the future, small signs that stability was slowly replacing survival. I never told him what to think about his mother. I never asked him to choose sides. I just stayed present, reliable, clear, because that was the difference now. I wasn't rescuing. I wasn't buffering. I wasn't absorbing consequences meant for someone else. I was showing him what adulthood actually looks like. Boundaries, follow through, truth without cruelty. Months later, I realized something else. The fear that once controlled me had nothing to hold on to anymore. No leverage, no access, no emergency that required me to self-destruct to solve it. Peace didn't come from winning. It came from exiting the cycle, from letting systems do their job, from letting accountability land where it belonged. I didn't lose a family. I lost a role that was killing me. And in its place, I gained a future that didn't require silence, sacrifice, or self-erasure. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in it, the overfunctioning, the constant fixing, the guilt that shows up the moment you stop, hear this clearly. Walking away is not abandonment when staying means disappearing. Protecting yourself is not cruelty, it's responsibility. And choosing peace does not mean you didn't love enough. It means you loved yourself enough to stop bleeding quietly. If this story resonated with you, I'd like to hear from you. Would you have stayed longer, or would you have stepped away sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this help you feel less alone, please like, share, and subscribe to Family Justice Files. There are more stories coming about boundaries, accountability, and what happens when people finally stop paying the price for someone else's choices.